teenager sees an elderly man crying in the park and approaches to help, but when she does, she uncovers a secret that alters their lives forever. The sun shone brightly over Oakwood Park, casting a warm glow on the vibrant flowers and lush green grass. Lyra and her best friend Mia strolled along the winding path, laughter bubbling from their lips as they joked about school and their dreams for the future. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming petals, and the sounds of children playing nearby created a joyful backdrop to their carefree day. "Did you see how Mr. Thompson tripped during the math quiz?" Mia giggled, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "I thought he was going to fall right into his equations." Lyra laughed, her heart light. "I know, and the way he turned bright red was priceless. I'm surprised he didn't just disappear." But their laughter faded as they noticed a figure sitting alone on a nearby bench. An elderly man, his face lined with age and sorrow, wept quietly, tears streaming down his cheeks. Lyra felt a sudden tug at her heart, curiosity mingling with concern. She glanced at Mia, who looked back with wide eyes, unsure of what to do. "Should we say something?" Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mia hesitated. "It's kind of awkward, right? What if he doesn't want to talk?" Lyra's gaze drifted back to the man. Something in his posture resonated with her own feelings of solitude and pressure. School was tough, and her family often expected too much. She felt a connection, a pull towards this stranger. "I think we should. He looks really sad." With her heart racing, Lyra began to walk toward the bench, her feet moving almost on their own. As she got closer, her mind raced with questions. What if he didn't want help? What if she made things worse? But deep down, her empathy overrode her fears. "Excuse me, sir," Lyra said gently, her voice trembling slightly. "Are you all right?" Walter looked up, startled. His eyes were red, filled with a sadness that seemed to stretch far beyond the park's boundaries. For a moment, he didn't respond, the silence between them heavy with unspoken grief. Lyra felt a wave of anxiety wash over her, but she stood her ground. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude," she added quickly, not wanting to impose on his sorrow. "I just wanted to check if you needed someone to talk to." Walter took a deep breath, his chest rising slowly as he wiped a tear from his cheek. "It's just hard sometimes," he finally replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You think you're fine, and then something hits you." Lyra nodded, feeling her own heartache reflected in his words. "I get that. Sometimes it feels like everything is too much, right?" He looked at her, surprise flickering in his eyes. "You're young. What could be too much for you?" Lyra hesitated. The weight of expectations from school and her family pressed down on her like a heavy blanket. "It's just, I feel like I'm always trying to keep up, and it's exhausting. Sometimes I just want to escape." Walter studied her, his gaze softening. "We all carry our burdens, don't we? Some are just heavier than others." Lyra felt a strange comfort in his words, a bond forming between them in that quiet moment. "What about you? What's making you sad?" Walter hesitated, a shadow crossing his face. "I lost my wife a while ago. Some days it feels like she's still here, and other days the emptiness is unbearable." Lyra's heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry. That sounds really hard." He nodded, gratitude flickering in his eyes. "Thank you for asking. It's not something I share easily, but it helps to say it out loud." In that moment, Lyra realized that kindness could bridge even the widest gaps. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting golden rays around them, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could help each other heal. Walter took a deep breath, his eyes glistening with tears as he began to speak. "You know," he said softly, "my wife, Margaret, was the light of my life. We were married for over 50 years. His voice trembled slightly, but the warmth in his tone was unmistakable. Lyra listened intently, her heart swelling with empathy. "What was she like?" she asked, trying to encourage him to share more. A small smile broke through Walter's sorrow. "She was full of laughter. Always had a way of making me smile, even on my worst days. We would spend hours in the garden, planting flowers and watching them grow. It was our little escape from the world." He paused, gazing into the distance as if he could see Margaret there among the blooming flowers. Lyra felt a pang in her chest. She thought about her own life, filled with pressures from school and family. "I can't imagine how hard it must be for you," she said gently, "to be without her." Walter nodded slowly, his expression growing somber again. "Every day feels like a struggle. I wake up and expect to see her by my side, but the bed is empty. The house is quiet." His voice broke, and Lyra could see the pain etched on his face. "Sometimes I just sit here, hoping that someone will notice my sadness." Lyra's heart ached for him. "I know how that feels," she admitted. "Sometimes I feel so alone, even when I'm surrounded by people. It's like no one understands what I'm going through." Walter turned to her, his eyes wide with understanding. "What do you feel alone about, Lyra?" She hesitated, unsure if she should share her struggles. But something about Walter's vulnerability made her feel safe. "I feel pressure to succeed at school," she confessed. "My parents have high expectations, and I worry that I'll never be good enough." Walter listened, nodding slowly. "It's hard to carry those expectations. I remember when I was younger, I felt the same way, but I learned that it's okay to be imperfect. We all have our burdens to bear." The warmth of the sun bathed them as they shared their thoughts. Lyra felt a surprising connection with Walter. They were both carrying heavy weights, yet here they were, talking openly about it. The world around them faded away, leaving just the two of them in their moment of understanding. "You loved her so much," Lyra said softly. "It's clear she meant everything to you." Walter smiled faintly, the sadness still lingering in his eyes. "She did. Losing her has left a hole in my heart that I don't know how to fill." He looked down at his hands, trembling slightly. "But talking about her helps. It keeps her memory alive." Lyra nodded, feeling a sense of urgency to help him. "Maybe we could do something in her memory," she suggested, "something that honors her life." His eyes met hers, a flicker of hope igniting within him. "What do you have in mind?" "How about we plant a flower here, right at this bench," Lyra proposed, her excitement bubbling within her. "We could pick something beautiful that reminds us of her." Walter considered her idea, his brow furrowing in thought. "A flower. That could be nice. But will it really mean something?" "Of course," Lyra replied earnestly. "Every time we see it, we'll remember her. And it'll grow, just like your love for her." Walter's lips curled into a small smile. "I think I'd like that," he said softly. "It would be nice to have something living here, something that reminds me of the good times." As they sat together, the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a golden glow across the park. Lyra felt a warmth inside her, realizing that this moment was more than just about flowers. It was about connection, healing, and finding a way to honor the past while looking forward to the future. "Let's go to the greenhouse then," Lyra said, her heart racing with anticipation. "We can find the perfect flower together." Walter nodded, a newfound sense of purpose brightening his eyes. "Yes, let's do that," he replied, a hint of excitement breaking through his sadness. As Walter sat on the familiar bench, he felt a buzz in his pocket. He pulled out his phone and saw the reminder. Margaret's birthday was coming up. A wave of sadness washed over him, and the world around him faded. The bright colors of spring seemed dull against the weight of his grief. Lyra noticed his expression change, the light in his eyes dimming. "What's wrong, Walter?" she asked softly, concern filling her voice. Walter sighed deeply, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. It's just, Margareth's birthday is soon. I always loved celebrating it with her. Now, it just feels empty. His voice trembled as he spoke, the pain of loss evident in every word. Lyra felt a knot in her stomach. She wished she could take away his hurt, but she didn't know how. After a moment of silence, an idea sparked in her mind. What if we did something special for her? Walter looked at her, confused. What do you mean? Maybe we could plant a flower here, in her memory. You know, something beautiful that will grow every spring, Lyra suggested, her eyes lighting up with the thought. Walter hesitated, the idea swirling in his mind. A flower? He thought about it, and then his gaze softened. That might be nice, but I don't know if I can. Please, Walter, Lyra urged gently. I think it could help both of us. It's a way to honor her and to remember the good times you shared. Walter looked deeply into Lyra's eyes and saw the hope shining there. All right, let's do it, he said, a small smile breaking through his sadness. Let's plant a flower. With a newfound sense of purpose, they walked to the park's greenhouse together. As they entered, the air was filled with the sweet scent of earth and blooming flowers. Lyra felt a tingle of excitement. She moved closer to the vibrant colors and textures, her heart racing with possibilities. Which one do you think we should choose? Lyra asked, her voice brightening. She touched the petals of a delicate pink flower, letting the softness linger on her fingertips. Walter studied the flowers, his brow furrowed in thought. Margareth loved daisies, he said, a hint of warmth creeping into his tone. They always reminded her of our garden. Daisies it is then, Lyra exclaimed, her enthusiasm infectious. They found a pot filled with cheerful daisies, their white petals dancing in the light. This one, Walter said, pointing to the most vibrant bunch. It's perfect. As they purchased the flower, Lyra felt a sense of solidarity. They were creating something together, taking a step forward in their healing. The act of choosing the flower was more than just a decision. It was a promise to remember, to celebrate love, and to embrace life even in sorrow. Back at the bench, they prepared to plant the flower. Walter knelt down and began to dig a small hole in the soil. Lyra joined him, her hands eager to feel the earth beneath her fingers. Do you want to say something? She asked quietly, sensing the weight of the moment. Walter paused, looking at the flower in his hand. Margareth, you were my light. I miss you every day. I hope you can see this flower and know that I will always love you, he spoke, his voice thick with emotion. Lyra listened, her heart aching for Walter. She would love this, she said softly. You are keeping her memory alive. With care, they placed the daisy into the ground, covering the roots with soil. As they worked, Walter's tears fell, mingling with the earth. Lyra felt the cool soil under her nails, a reminder that even in sorrow, life continued to bloom. Walter looked up, a small smile forming on his lips. Thank you, Lyra. This means a lot to me. I'm glad, Walter, she replied, feeling lighter herself. We're in this together. As they stepped back, they admired their work. The flower stood tall, a sign of remembrance and hope. In that moment, they both knew that while grief might linger, there was also a chance for renewal and connection. As Lyra and Walter knelt beside the bench, the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the park. They had chosen a soft pink flower, delicate yet vibrant, perfect for honoring Margareth. Walter held the flower gently, his fingers trembling slightly as he prepared to plant it. Do you think Margareth would like it? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra looked at him, her heart aching for the man who had shared so much of his pain with her. I think she would love it. It's beautiful, just like the memories you shared, she replied, her own hands digging into the rich, dark soil. Walter nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. He leaned forward, allowing the tears to fall freely, mixing with the earth. For a moment, the world around them faded away. It was just the two of them, sharing a quiet understanding that transcended words. Lyra felt the cool, damp soil beneath her nails as she planted the flower. Each scoop of earth felt like a step toward healing, not just for Walter, but for herself as well. "It feels good to do something like this," she said, glancing at Walter. "It's like we're creating a little piece of happiness in the middle of sadness." Walter looked up, a small smile breaking through his sorrow. "You're right, Lyra. This flower will grow and remind me that life continues, even when it feels impossible." As they finished planting the flower, Lyra sat back on her heels and admired their work. The flower stood proudly in the soil, a symbol of resilience. "We should come back and check on it every week. It will be our little project," she suggested, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "I would like that," Walter replied, a hint of hope in his voice. "It will be something to look forward to." Feeling a sense of accomplishment, Lyra brushed her hands against her jeans, trying to rid them of the dirt. "I'm really glad I met you, Walter. You've changed my view on a lot of things," she admitted, her voice steady. Walter turned to her, his gaze softening. "You've changed mine too, Lyra. I'm not alone anymore. You've brought light into my life when I thought it was all darkness." Lyra felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. "I think we both needed this. We've both felt lost, but now we have each other," she said, her heart swelling with gratitude. They shared a moment of silence, letting the significance of their connection wash over them. The wind rustled the leaves above, a gentle reminder that nature continued on, just like their lives would. "Do you want to take a picture?" Lyra suddenly asked, pulling out her phone. "We can capture this moment." Walter laughed softly, the sound like music to Lyra's ears. "Sure, but let's make sure to get the flower in it. It deserves to be remembered." They positioned themselves beside the newly planted flower, both smiling genuinely for the first time in a long while. Lyra snapped the picture, capturing not just their faces, but the essence of their shared experience. "This is a memory I want to keep," she said, looking at the image. After a few moments, they began to gather their things. Walter stood slowly, stretching his back. "I should go home now," he said, a hint of reluctance in his tone. "But I promised to come back and see our flower." "Me too," Lyra replied, standing beside him. "Let's meet here again next week? Same time?" "Absolutely," Walter agreed, a smile returning to his face. "Thank you for today, Lyra. You helped me in ways I can't express." As they walked away from the bench, both felt lighter than they had before. They had shared tears and laughter, creating something beautiful from their grief. Hope bloomed between them, a seed planted in the soil of their hearts. With a promise to meet again, they parted ways, each carrying a little more light and a little less sorrow, knowing that they had begun to heal together. As the weeks rolled on, Lyra found herself returning to Oakwood Park more often. The sun was shining brightly, but it was not just the warmth of the day that drew her back. It was the comfort of her growing friendship with Walter. Each visit felt like stepping into a safe space where understanding and shared sorrow welcomed her. On one particularly bright afternoon, Lyra approached the familiar bench where Walter sat. He looked up, his face breaking into a smile that warmed her heart. "Lyra, I was hoping you'd come," he said, his voice filled with a gentle joy. "Of course, Walter. I wouldn't miss our time together," she replied, settling beside him. The flower they had planted together stood proudly next to the bench, its vibrant petals swaying gently in the breeze. Walter's eyes sparkled with memories. "Did I ever tell you about the first time Margaret and I went to the beach?" he began, his voice softening as he spoke. "It was a sunny day just like today. We built the biggest sandcastle you could imagine, and it collapsed right as we were about to add the finishing touches." Lyra chuckled, picturing the scene. "What did you do?" "We both just laughed. We decided to start again, and that time, we built it together, stronger and better," he said, his gaze drifting to the flower. Margaret always believed that things could be rebuilt, no matter how many times they fell apart. "I like that," Lyra said, her heart swelling with warmth. "It's like how we are learning to rebuild ourselves, right? After everything we've been through." Walter nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Exactly, my dear. It's all about finding strength in our struggles. You have a light in you, Lyra. I see it every time you smile." Blushing, Lyra looked down at her hands. "I'm just trying to figure things out. Sometimes I feel lost with school and, well, everything." Walter leaned closer, his voice steady. "It's okay to feel that way. You're not alone in this. I've had my share of battles, and sometimes it helps to talk about them. What weighs on your heart?" Taking a deep breath, Lyra opened up. "I feel so much pressure to do well in school. My parents expect a lot from me. Sometimes I think I can't meet their expectations, and it makes me feel inadequate." Walter listened intently, his expression serious. "I understand. I felt that way when I lost Margaret. The world kept moving, but I felt stuck. It took time, but I learned that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to ask for help." Lyra felt a sense of relief wash over her. "It's nice to know that you understand. You've been through so much, and yet you're here, helping me." Walter smiled. "We help each other. That's the beauty of connection. It can be a powerful source of strength." As their conversation flowed, Lyra noticed a shift within herself. With each story Walter shared, she felt her confidence growing. His resilience inspired her to confront her own challenges more openly. "Maybe I should try talking to my parents about how I feel," she suggested. "I've been holding it all inside for too long." "That's a wonderful idea," Walter encouraged. "You deserve to express yourself. You might be surprised by how they react. Communication can open doors to understanding." With renewed hope, Lyra smiled brightly. "Thanks, Walter. I'll try. And what about you? Do you think you'll ever share all these wonderful stories about Margaret with others?" Walter looked pensive for a moment. "I think I will. I want to honor her memory, and sharing our stories can help others who are struggling too." As they talked, the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park. Lyra glanced at the flower again, now fully blossomed, and felt a sense of joy blossom within her. "Look at that flower," she said, pointing. "It's like a symbol of us, growing and healing together." Walter chuckled softly. "Yes, it is. And just as flowers need sunlight and care to grow, so do we." With that thought, they both sat in silence, watching the sun dip below the horizon, filled with a sense of peace and a deepening bond that promised hope for the days to come. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow over Oakwood Park. It was the day they had planned for weeks, a small gathering to honor Margaret's memory. Lyra felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as she stood beside Walter near the bench where they had first connected. Colorful flowers adorned the picnic table, each one a tribute to someone lost but never forgotten. "Are you ready for this?" Walter asked, adjusting his glasses and glancing at Lyra with a kind smile. "I think so," she replied, her voice steadying. "It feels special, doesn't it? Like we're doing something important." Walter nodded, his gaze drifting to the flower they had planted together. It stood tall and vibrant, a symbol of life and renewal. "This flower is a reminder that even in sadness, beauty can grow," he said softly, "just like our memories of those we love." As guests began to arrive, Lyra welcomed each one with a warm smile. There was Mrs. Thompson, who had lost her husband last year, and young Ethan, whose mother had passed away when he was just a child. Each person brought their own stories of loss, creating a tapestry of shared experiences. "Thank you for inviting us," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice shaky but full of gratitude. "It's nice to be here with others who understand." Lyra felt a swell of warmth in her chest. "We're all here to remember and to celebrate life," she replied. "Margaret would have loved this." The gathering began with stories. Walter stood up first, his voice steady and strong as he shared fond memories of Margaret. She loved to dance in the rain. Every spring, we would go outside, and she would twirl around, laughing as the drops soaked us, he recounted, a smile breaking through his sadness. Lyra watched as the guests listened intently. They smiled through their tears, finding joy in Walter's words. It was a moment of connection, a reminder that even in grief, laughter could still echo. Next, it was Lyra's turn. She took a deep breath, glancing at Walter for encouragement. "I didn't know Margaret, but I feel her spirit here with us today," she started. "She brought so much love into the world, and I see that love reflected in Walter." Walter's eyes sparkled with pride, and he gave her an encouraging nod. "I've learned a lot from you, Walter," Lyra continued, her confidence growing. "You've shown me that it's okay to feel sad and to talk about it. It's okay to miss the people we love." As she spoke, Lyra noticed the guests nodding in agreement. They were sharing in the moment, finding solace in each other's words. After the stories, they gathered around the flower they had planted. Walter held Lyra's hand gently as he said, "This flower is a part of Margaret and a part of our lives now. Let's remember that love is never lost. It continues to grow." With that, everyone took turns sharing a memory or a word of hope as they placed their hands on the flower. Lyra felt the warmth of their collective presence, a sense of community wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. Later, as the sun began to set, Walter turned to Lyra. "Thank you for organizing this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It means more than you know." Lyra smiled back, her heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you, Walter. You taught me that sharing our pain can bring us closer together." They stood together, watching the flower sway gently in the evening breeze. It was a moment of quiet reflection, a realization that while grief can feel isolating, it can also lead to beautiful connections. As the last guests departed, Lyra took a deep breath, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. "I think we did something really good today," she said, looking at Walter. "Yes, we did," he replied, a spark of hope in his eyes. "This is just the beginning, Lyra. Together, we can keep growing." With that, they walked away from the park, hand in hand, both transformed by the day's events. In the depths of sorrow, they had found resilience, love, and a renewed sense of purpose. Share this story if you believe that love can help us overcome even the toughest challenges. Leave a comment about how a heartfelt gathering has impacted your life, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. Together, let's celebrate the beauty of connection and resilience.